Ilana Razbash, and this is Radio Architecture.
Good evening from beautiful Bunurong country. I am broadcasting to you live from the unceded lands of the Eastern Kulin Nation, from right here in the ancient Karim swampland. We begin with a couple of apologies first this evening. First is Radio Karim is going through a bit of a technical transition at the moment, and our live studio text line is down for this broadcast recording. We are so sorry for all listeners who may have been saving up and preparing their questions. The second apology, unfortunately, this evening is that due to unforeseen circumstances, Nonda Katsalides will not be joining us for the broadcast, and my guest and conversation partner this evening is Karl Fender. Karl is the founding partner of multidisciplinary international design firm Karl Fender Katsalides, playing a pivotal role in exporting Australian architectural expertise to the global stage. His most significant recent international achievement is the design of Merdeka 118 in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Standing at 680 metres, this megatall skyscraper is the second tallest building in the world. Karl's leadership on this project underscores his ability to create culturally resonant landmarks, with the tower's faceted diamond-shaped facade drawing inspiration from traditional Malaysian songket patterns and the silhouette of Tunku Abdul Rahman's hand raised during the nation's independence declaration. Fender's design philosophy is deeply rooted in a human-centric approach to architecture and urbanism, a perspective honed during his early career under the mentorship of legendary modernist Robin Boyd and further developed during his studies at Harvard University. Beyond his design portfolio, Fender has been a formidable leader in the governance and advancement of Australian architectural profession. He has served as the national president of the Australian Institute of Architects and has held prominent positions on the global stage, including chairman of the Council of Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat Awards jury. In recognition of his extensive services to architecture and professional institutions, he was awarded the Medal of the Order of Australia, OAM. This accolade acknowledged not just his built work, but his enduring commitment to elevating industry standards and advocating for better urban design outcomes. Welcome to the program, Karl.
Thank you, Ilana, and hi everyone out there.
And hello to our listeners as well who may be watching live on YouTube. You can see us too. Such an honour to have you in the studio here tonight. Such an honour to have this conversation. And I'm so interested in going first back to the beginning. Mm-hmm. There's this question that I love to ask all my guests, and it's, what's your earliest memory of a building or place?
What a great question. My father, he passed away quite some time ago, year 2000. And in going through all of his papers and affairs, I found a satchel of my drawings that I'd done. And the earliest drawing is of a house. Now, I think that probably most kids started by drawing a house, but I like to think it was prophetic. But that, as I went on and went through, the junior schools, I remember, grade 1, grade 2, making buildings, but they were like stage sets, and I really loved doing that. Just, I suppose, like most kids, but I like to think that's where it all started.
You're going to be an architect really from birth.
Yeah, I didn't really put it in those terms at the time. I was just having fun and enjoying myself.
Did somebody guide you, or did you already know that there was an architecture profession out there?
No. My parents were Dutch. They although I was born in Holland, they brought me up in Indonesia till I was 5 when we came out to Australia as immigrants. And just trying to become an Australian kid, one of the regulars was really the thing, you're just a kid in a new place and trying to fit in. So it wasn't really about ambitions or, ideas of what I might do in 20 years' time, far from my mind.
It was some of those basic immediate challenges. What was Australia like back then? What was the biggest kind of hurdle to fitting in?
Oh, look, that is, again, a fantastic question. It brings back memories of how my parents started. They came. My father was a captain in the Dutch Navy. They lived in Indonesia, a privileged life. And when they came here, basically after the war, they had nothing. So my first memory, pardon me, is of them sharing a house in Blackburn, an old Victorian farmhouse, with another Dutch family who had a lot of kids. And I remember, being bathed in the kitchen sink and not running down the corridor of the house because the plaster ceiling might fall in. But they were very formative years, and it was great to see how they dealt with becoming, in those days, new Australians. And they bought, in 1954, they bought their house in Burwood for, I think it was £4,000
Wow.
on an unmade street.
Wow.
Without sewerage, without storm water. We had a nightman come once a week. You don't know what that is, I'm not going to go there. But the end of the street was a barbed wire fence, and beyond that was a forest.
Wow.
And even in that forest, I remember there was a cut tree. So we were really one of the first houses in the area, which had all been about orchards. My life growing up was watching all these houses get built and nicking bits of timber and whatever I could to make huts, and then finally, getting some friends there. My first friends were the two dogs that lived up the road in the neighbour's house that would come down and visit and play football with me, and it really was quite an amazing upbringing. It was just normal to me at the time, but when I think back and when I go back there and when I see the extent of the suburb,
Yes.
the suburbs that was the edge of, I'm gobsmacked. The sprawl of, suburbia.
I'm wondering if there's any drawings or paintings of that area at the time. If someone had captured this moment, or even yourself, perhaps as a child, if you had drawn it in that paper stack.
No, there were. Brax, he drew the suburbs. And in fact, there's one of the talks I do where I use his paintings and say, here's a painting of the establishment of the suburbs. And then I show our house, which is sitting there by itself, and I show the need for the car. And, he did a beautiful drawing of the family in the car. And then I've got this photograph of my father, my mother, and me in the Hillman Minx. It was very different, very pioneering, but at the time, it was normal.
And was there a big spirit of optimism? People weren't afraid of change, of suburbs spreading?
No one had any idea. In fact, we were thought to live on the outer suburbs, and it was very community oriented. My folks were Dutch. They spoke Dutch. They spoke Dutch in the house, and as people started to come into Burwood, there were a lot of Dutch people. So I grew up in a Dutch house, even though all my friends at school were little Aussie kids, and it was very, very social. They were very close. They helped each other out. One of my father's friends was a mechanic, and he would come and, tinker with the electrics, and I would do the grease and oil changes of our Morris Minor. And a lot of life was about us as a family, the three of us, going and visiting their friends in different parts of the neighbourhood and having a meal and then coming home. People would drop into our house, Dutchies. They wouldn't go to the front door and knock. They'd come round to the back door and just come inside the house and say, "Hi, we're here." That's how it was. It was quite amazing, really, when I think back.
I love that. And you were always very, very creative and inventive and making it and building, experimenting what would later become maquettes of architecture. But when did you know that architecture as a profession was an option for you?
We've got to skip till when I was about 16. And because my father was a Navy man, I always thought, well, I'll join the Navy. And then the truth of that dawned on me. And I realised I actually didn't want to join the Navy. And I remember talking about it to my mother, and my mother was quite pragmatic. She said, "I think you should become an engineer. That's a very upstanding, good course." So I said, okay. We went to RMIT and got the handbook. It didn't take me long to get onto the pages about architecture, and all of a sudden that resonated. and I knew that I was never going to be an engineer, and I loved the subjects in architecture, and that was, well, in a way it was my downfall because I couldn't get into architecture.
Oh, really?
In those days, you had to do maths, physics, chemistry, the subjects that I was appalling at. So I had to do them, and so as a consequence, I failed leaving. Well, leaving was the penultimate year, so I did that twice and scratched my way through. And then matriculation, which was year 12, I failed that. I didn't fail any of the humanities subjects, English, art, history, but the maths, physics, chemistry, no. So I didn't get into architecture. I couldn't get in. So I thought, wow, this course in the book, which is called Architectural Draftsmanship, this could be okay because it's a lot of the same subjects. And I do remember turning up to RMIT, and Terry Summers, the teacher or the professor that was handling all the new arrivals, said, right, everyone doing architectural drafting, go through that door, and everyone else doing architecture, go through that door. So 100 of us went through that door, but I noticed that if you could just walk through the door, why don't I? So I did that as well and just enrolled in architectural design.
Brilliant.
And design, of course, was the one subject that was always the core subject every year. So
You didn't ask anyone for permission.
just did it.
Did it.
As you did.
That's an awesome lesson for our listeners. That's
I think-
unbelievable
I think
advice.
I think the lesson is just do the improbable, and you never know. But see, it's amazing how things work out, because by doing that, by not doing architecture, I had to do 2 years full-time doing architectural draftsmanship. And then the course you had to do 2 years part-time, and it was at night school. So after 2 years, I had to get a job. And I don't know what possessed me, but I applied at Romberg and Boyd. And I got a job, which was amazing because obviously he's still a hero.
Yes.
He's still someone that contributed in majestic ways, and obviously, at the age of 52 died prematurely.
Yes.
But he was a man of the world. He was a wonderful brain, a beautiful hand. The drawings he did were just stunning.
And quite a gentle person as well.
He's a very gentle man. So here I am. He said to me, I don't normally employ draftsmen, but I had this chap, I forget his name, but I had this chap and he's just left and he was a draftsman. So let's give you a job. So I started, and that was a very intense, when I say intense, I was absorbing everything I could in that small office. And everybody in that office was committed and wonderful, and the mentoring there was very, very privileged, I have to say.
What's the biggest lesson
That
you received with Robin Boyd?
That's a really good lesson. That's a good question, because starting, you don't even realise you're getting lessons. You're there absorbing, and you're absorbing at a lot of different levels. And I had a couple of mentors. One was Bill Williams, who's no longer with us, and the other was Paul Cooch, who was the mainstay of the office. And in fact, I was just at his book launch the other day. Unfortunately, Paul wasn't there, but he went on. He was a great architect in the Boyd office, and he went on to very, very quietly just do amazing, strong work, clear ideas, but ideas that think beyond the norm, different ways of living. And I think that was one of the things that I really learnt, the way that Robin Boyd, he designed incredible houses for often incredible people, but they were all thought out in very, very personal, searching ways. And the houses, look at the Featherston house. Do you know the Featherston
Yes.
house?
Yeah.
That was done by Robin, and Paul Cooch was the architect that saw it through. But that house to me is still an absolutely wondrous house. And in fact, I think I've been there since, but I remember one of the last times during the office, I went there with Bill Williams and Grant Fett. This shows you how the house gets
How
used.
interconnected everything is.
So Grant Featherston's sitting in one of his chairs that he designed on the lowest living platform. He's reading the paper and he's got a hose in his hand watering the garden, which was the floor of the house. So the house was comprised platforms sitting in the garden, and it still does, with a translucent roof, so the cloud changes came through. That thinking was just so dramatically different and wonderful, and the experience of being in any of the houses that Robin did was remarkable. It challenged you on the one hand, but it also it just made you feel wonderful, really wonderful. Yeah.
Did that whole experience teach you to be even more brave with your designs?
I don't know if it was brave, but it taught me to do something that had a standard of design thinking about it, something that really responded to the people that I was designing for.
To the human condition.
Definitely the human condition, but also the context. What did the views, land, wind, what did that bring out? What were the potentials of dealing with those things in the design? It's not like almost passive design, but take advantage of great views and, all of those obvious things. And it gave me the confidence as well, because when he died, I'd only been in the office 4 years until the day he passed away. And I remember there was nowhere else I wanted to work, so it was a bit of a dilemma. But I was a rapid learner there because I was in that environment. And so I had gained a few commissions that I was doing in my spare time, part-time. And I just worked out of my living room and finished those houses, and they just, they were, I was privileged because I had a very good upbringing in that office, and it taught me a little bit about running a contract and dealing with builders, and the office was great. And tell me if I'm rambling, but I'm really
I love these stories and memories.
The main drawing office just had about 5 of us or 6 of us in there, and there was one phone, a black Bakelite phone that sat on the chest on top of the drawing files. And all of a sudden, I had to deal with builders, except that it was on that Bakelite phone and everybody could listen.
You had a whole audience.
There was an audience, so that taught me pretty quickly to forget all that and just do what I had to do. But no, it was very, very privileged. And I think the first office experiences are so important for graduates. And I think that there has to be a great generosity of spirit in practices to take young kids on and set them on their path, because from those first experience, certainly in architecture, the architect will be born.
Yes. It's a scary moment at the moment that we're in, that AI is potentially in the future going to be threatening these junior positions, but also the sustainability of the business of practice and architecture firms being able to really have enough resources to bring in this next generation talent.
I agree. Once upon a time, the architect was everything. He was the architect, the designer, the project manager, ran things, he did everything. Then project managers were invented, and the architects were very, very indignant.
Yeah.
That's our job. Why is anyone else coming in? And those first project managers, they had a bit of learning to do too. But as we've gone forward, the projects have become big, complicated. you can't expect one person to be everything to everyone. So I think, now project managers, they're part of a team, a complex team that has to know how to work together and know not only their boundaries but their potentials in the group to create excellence. So this is a lot for the young people to take in, and hopefully they start as generalists, but they find what they really enjoy doing in what is a very complex and under-recognised profession.
Truly. What's your biggest piece of advice to the next generation?
All I can say, look, I had opportunities come to me, but I think they came to me because I was very, very thirsty to learn more. I even liked business admin. I liked all of the Institute put out lots of standard forms. I used to love all of that.
Yeah.
But I couldn't negotiate my way out of a matchbox. It's not my calling. So it's good for them to just be open to all experiences. Do not necessarily cut them off quickly. Always be thirsty for knowledge. Look, listen, travel, feel, experience, all of those things. See, architecture is just the greatest of jobs in a way, because, or the education is, because it makes people think in very different ways to people that go down the field of the lawyers or the accountants, bankers, anything. They will all have various opinions about things, but they're very focused on their job. Focusing on the job of architecture is opening your eyes and ears to the world and to other people, and listening and translating desires into three-dimensional outcomes that will affect people's lives. It's phenomenal. And you talk to people that studied architecture for a while and it wasn't their calling and they went on to something else. They never say that the architecture course was rubbish.
No, it's always the strongest foundation.
It has given them an incredible foundation. So it's, and it's hard. It's very hard to get a job these days, especially since since Victoria was bankrupted. But we're struggling now to get things back on the rails, get jobs going again, and all of that. And kids have to come out of school and find a job. So we have to, as practices, try to bring them on when we can, if we can afford it, and just give them a chance.
It's a future of that continuity, because then they can start the next great practice one day.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about your time at Harvard. What then pushed you to return to more studies? Because that wasn't compulsory. That would have been then optional for you.
Well, I've got to tell you, I've got to share a secret.
A secret?
Well,
a scoop for radio architecture.
So when I didn't ever finish my studies at RMIT.
Really?
No. And I was doing a diploma course, and I was married and had a child. My wife was 6 months pregnant, and I was working after Robin died and I finished my stint doing my buildings. I started with Graham Gunn, called Gunn Hayball, with Len Hayball, another fantastic person in the industry. And I'd been there for about a year. I was hired to do working drawings because everyone in the Boyd office could do beautiful working drawings. And I never did one. I started designing with Graham, who at the time was the dean at RMIT, Dean of Architecture School. And I remember one Friday night, it's quite a social office, and I think one Friday night we'd had a few bottles of something nice, and they said to me, "Oh, Karl, look, we'd like to make you a partner." And I went, "Oh, wow, that's just amazing." And that was a Friday night. And on Monday morning I resigned because we realised we'd never travel. If I was going to give everything to a practice,
Yes.
and my wife was 6 months pregnant, we had to go quickly.
Yes.
So I'm getting to the point. So we got the house ready for rental. I thought to myself, I should go and talk to the registrar and just see what I don't know why I did this, but see what my status is. And I showed him my portfolio of work I'd done at RMIT, design work, the work that I'd worked on in Robin's office, and the work that I'd done by myself. And he said, "Oh, son, this is very good work. Very good work. I think we can register you." So
It was different back then.
to all the people, all the graduates that have to get registered and do those exams and do all of that, I apologise. I went to London, and when I was in London, I got this certificate, Karl Fender, registered architect, Karl Fender of London,
Wow.
registered architect #1. So there I am. I'm now registered. I'm in London. I go across. I work in Italy I work in London, then I work in Italy. And Italy was working with Americans, and they had an office in Boston. And my boss was, he was a disciple of Eero Saarinen, and he was a very interesting, strange guy. If he liked you, you had to work 24/7. If he didn't like you, you could work there, but you never saw him. But the trouble is, if he liked you, it was very hard to leave. And after 4 or 5 years, I needed to leave because it had been full on. So I thought, the only way I can leave in good grace is to go to Harvard, because that's his alma mater, and he will see that as not an insult. And I don't know how I did it, but I applied at a few schools, but I got into a Masters 2 course. So that was regarded to be for advanced students. So I'm 32 at the time. And there were 14 people in that studio that could do it in just over a year. And they came, 2 from Australia, 2 from America, 2 from here, 2 from there. And I got in. And it was my chance to find out what I thought about design, because in that first decade, I was designing a lot, but for other people. What would Spiro think? What would Graham? It was all about thinking how I should design something to be part of the college of that particular office.
Yes.
So I didn't know much about myself, to tell you the truth. I knew how to think, but not think the creative path. But Harvard was a fantastic place to do exactly that. And it was a very, very profound and rich experience for me.
What was the biggest discovery for yourself that you didn't know about yourself as a creative, as an architect, as a designer?
Because I'll tell you what it was. It was to do with, I'd been a production architect. And I had a professor there called Jerzy Soltan, who was a disciple of Corbusier. After the war, he walked to Corb's office and said, "I'm here to work with you." And Corb said, "Well, sit over there and let's get going." But Soltan thought like Corb, drew like Corb, was a painter like Corb, and he was very poetic. The first thing he said to the class, to us, was, what I want you to do is go down to the art shop and buy crayon, butcher's paper and clay. And he said, the reason for this is, I don't want any of you to fall in love with your drawings. Interesting. Mm-hmm. So, because you could do a design and then get lost in the drawing. Like a lot of kids, perhaps not anymore, but when rapid production started, they'd fall in love with their rapid production models, but not be thinking about the spaces within and how. So, the first project that I did, I bought all of that stuff and I got the charcoal, and that was all a bit scungy and dirty, and so I did a design, and a week later I came to Jersey to Sultan and said, "Look, what do you think?" And he said, "It's quite nice. But Karl, you've got a long way to go." And that was so interesting, because doing that and then working with the mediums, which you can't fall in love with, it's charcoal, it's dirty, it's, you know. The piece of work that I did in the end was experiential. It actually wasn't a formal piece of architecture of any style. It was a way of housing certain functions in certain ways in a certain context that wasn't about an architecture of Richard Meyer or Ando, or it was just about putting an experience down, which was based on history. It was based on the Mormon story. And that just taught me to think a little bit differently. So every time I'm designing now, I try to be really loose in my thinking at the start. And sometimes I say to myself, it's not bad. I wonder what Nanda would do here. And, you know, it's that sort of just searching, probing, but letting all of the potentials of a site and a program influence what you're doing, but trying to do it in a way that will be joyful and delightful, that those have to experience a space in the end. It's a long way of saying something. I'm not sure what I said, but
I know, I love that.
yeah. So that was the thing I learnt, not to close off the thinking too early, to examine everything you're doing, to think freely, and that's difficult. In my first practices, like when I first started with Graham and I had to design, it was highly personal. I didn't want it to share it because I was embarrassed about just displaying my thoughts. And I could draw really well, and that's what I did. I got lost in the art of drawing and didn't open myself to discussion, and you know, I felt like I had to prove myself. But I'm far from that now. Very far from that.
And so then after you returned to Australia,
Yeah.
you had a master's. How long until you started Fender Kitsulitis?
Well, I got back in 1980 and I started with Graham. And Graham and I and Bill Williams became partners when Len started another business. And in the mid-80s, and I have to go through this to get how I started, so again, I hope I'm not boring you, but in the mid-80s it was very tough here. So I said to Graham, look, let me take a leave of absence. I'll be back. I'll go back to Rome. I'll work with my old boss. That'll get me out of a pickle, because also my marriage had broken up and I was skint, to say the least. So it was at the same time I'd met Bob Nation. And when I said I was going back to Rome, Bob said to me, why don't you drop into Hong Kong, because it's very busy and I'm sure you'll get work there, and it's a hell of a place. So I did that, and that was the start of a whole Asian experience.
Was that your first encounter with big city density at that scale?
Yeah. Well, I'd lived in London and I'd lived in Rome, but Hong Kong is
Something else.
Is another thing, yeah. And so out of that, and I'll just skip to the chase, I did come back to Australia. I didn't go back with Graham. And I'd started in a firm with Nanda, and Bob in Hong Kong had got a big job to do. Bob and I used to have Friday breakfast and always talk about starting a practice, you know. In fact, we did a competition in India, which we thought we would win, but we didn't. And what was very strange is that on the way back to Hong Kong, we had one night in Bangkok to recover, thinking that we would be starting an office in India. In fact, we started an office in Bangkok because someone said to Bob, a real estate agent, do you do cities? And Bob said, yes, of course we do cities. And that's what we did. we started working in Thailand, in Bangkok, on this huge city, a satellite city called Muangthong Thani, and that was 5 intensive years. Before I then, when Asia and particularly Thailand collapsed economically, temporarily, I came back to Melbourne, and that's when Nanda and I put the practice together. And Bob was part of that practice for the first 5 years.
Wow, by that point, I'm counting it's almost a decade and a half of experience there easy.
Yeah, well, you know, going to a foreign country, well, first of all, working in Hong Kong was just fantastic. I worked in a fully Chinese business, about 150 people, and there were only 2 Guelos. One was American, one was me. But we were valued, and it was just a great, great life. And I had my now wife was there with me, and it was a great, great life. And so that got me, you know, I'd worked in London, Rome, Boston, because I did some part-time work there, and then Hong Kong, and then Thailand. So these are all experiences which at the time you don't realise are gifting you in a way with the privilege of working in different cultures.
Yes.
And having to respect that and having to deal with it in the work you do and the life you live there. So when I got back and teamed up with Nanda, and that was 30 odd years ago, I think 30 years ago, that was a fantastic period because Melbourne was starting to change. And Melbourne, everyone was in a house. There were a lot of empty nesters. And we started by bringing apartment living into Melbourne.
Postcode 3000.
Yeah. And but how did we get work? Because I had a very canny partner, Nanda, and he's a brilliant architect, and he's also very earnest in everything he does. And so to get a job, he made jobs. He became a developer. Excuse me.
And you've got to be entrepreneurial sometimes, especially when you're starting a business. You can't shy away from these topics, can you? So did you really have to... together you developed your first projects?
Nanda was the developer. And architects, well, certainly then we didn't have a lot of money, but he knew people that did, and they trusted him. So he became a developer in partnership with people that funded, and we did a lot of buildings in the city. Melbourne Terrace, well, Silos was one in Richmond,
yes.
Melbourne Terrace, Republic Tower, Hero, HMAS, the list goes on. And they were all, the first one we had to sell to our friends, but everyone realised that apartment living, if the apartments are nice, well thought out, artistic, was fantastic, especially with the market over the road. And, you know...
You had to really shape this taste, though. You had to shape the appetite.
There was a thirst.
There was a thirst.
There was a thirst. And those initial buildings, like, there's very rarely sales. People selling out of Melbourne Terrace or Republic Tower, for instance. But all of that led to Eureka Tower. Now, that was a dramatic step in the development world because most developments are 100 apartments, 120 apartments, or you staged it. This was one tower, 300 metres tall, or thereabouts, 600 over apartments. It was a real gamble. It was marketed in the year 2000. And there were a lot of naysayers about apartment living in Melbourne in those days.
Even still now?
Less now. Much less now. So, thankfully. So, it was a great success. That gave us tremendous pride in Melbourne. You know, Melbourne accepted this incredibly tall building on the other side of the river, and it was a real community that lived in it. So,
And a beautiful building at that. Eureka's greatest success is that it looks different from every aspect, every angle, every elevation. It does tell a story, tells a very Australian story on its facade about the Eureka Stockade.
it was a
But it's
good,
a beautiful building.
it was a good lesson for Merdeka, that building. But it also led to Australia 108, and and now it's apartments are a bit cruel at the moment, as we all know, because of the construction costs. There's huge demand for apartments, but the demand can't afford it. We're in a very much of a crisis at the moment, and hopefully, as things go, we'll get through it, and health will get back into the marketplace, and hopefully affordability, and there's a lot of steps to all of that, and too many to talk about now. But the idea that now residential is so accepted in the city and so loved in the city, and I like to think we were part of that early movement that
Taste
helped
making.
create that. Yeah.
Taste makers.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And it's also, I want to say that Eureka Tower is our skyline icon. That's what makes the Melbourne skyline memorable. Lest they disappear into this homogeny of tall, skinny towers about.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously the buildings that flavour a city.
Yes.
I just had to do a talk in Brasilia, and it's interesting because the Brazilian master plan was done by Costa, and it's a very taut, tight diagram, and it sort of looks pretty graphic, and you think, wow, that's pretty good. When I was over there, I had problems with it. The city is not a city of easy getting around or lots of people gathering. It's a city that's quite, in a sense, constrained by the master plan as an observation.
Rather than enhanced and enabled.
Yeah, I couldn't find the public places, But it's famous. Why?
Why?
Oscar Niemeyer.
Yes.
So, my thesis when I was talking over there was that it's the buildings that actually give the city its character. And, it's the interstitial spaces between the buildings that make the places for people. And Oscar Niemeyer's buildings don't make interstitial spaces so much, but they're just works of incredible beauty. And standing in the landscape, it's a phenomenal experience seeing them, crawling over them, wondering how this man came up with these things. It was fantastic. And he's done so much work there too.
I believe it's called the Bilbao effect in the value that good, beautiful, iconic architecture can give to a city and provide and truly resurrect a whole city and its economy.
Yeah.
Create a global attraction.
It's a good case in point. Your memory of cities often is a few buildings that really knock your socks off for one reason or another. Gimignano and its towers. If the towers weren't there, Gimignano would just be another lovely hill town. But it's this thing that reflects the economy of the time and the aspirations of the time. And and so many buildings, I guess, are just extrusions and become the background noise.
Yes.
And so buildings like Eureka and 108 and a lot of the other taller buildings that are shaping our skyline are what are defining Melbourne. If you come into Melbourne from the airport, you're looking at a real city.
Truly.
Let's
talk about your project in Malaysia. That's a decade of work. Opened last year in 2024. 680 metres tall. Do you get to a level where it's so big it doesn't matter how big it is anymore, or where the scale of the project where you approach it, well, it's all manageable?
It's something that you just start into. So, I got a fax.
Back in the day.
back in the day. No, well, it was beyond the days of faxes, so that made it even more strange. Would you be interested in?
Wow.
And I thought, oh,
And they had your fax number and you still had a fax machine.
and it came on yellow paper, and I have to say I put it down and forgot about it for a little while because I thought, is this serious? And I think I was travelling and going to travel, and I was cleaning my desk, and there it was. I thought, out of respect, we should answer this, and we did. And the next fax was, congratulations, you have been successful in stage 1 design for this building. And I'm still a little bit sceptical.
You haven't drawn anything by
tell
this
you
point.
the truth. No, that's the other. Didn't have to do schemes and competitions. It just came. It was just handed to us.
Wow.
So, and I did go over there, and I had to confront the board. So there's me, just me, on one side of this boardroom table, and the whole board. And I got interrogated about the fee. And I said, well, okay, but I'm still at the table, keep going. And then they said, well, you'll need to do 5 designs in 6 weeks to present to the Prime Minister. So, of course, I said, yep, okay. But it was all kind of abstract. It was like, okay. And I wasn't thinking, what are we going to do? What are we gonna do? Because
Just make it happen.
This is what we do.
Yeah.
We make these things happen. You work in a way, in a fashion that's appropriate for that time scale, for that demand and whatever. The last thing, the first things were a building of 678.9 metres tall, but a lot of that is a spire.
Yes.
That's got significant structural conditions that need to be met, you know, the wind and earth tremors and all of that. So you start thinking about structure and shaping, and you've got to combat the wind, disturb the wind, so you don't set up oscillation in the building, which can cause complete catastrophe if it starts rocking to destruction. And, you know, they use dampers in the roofs and all this sort of thing. But so you have to think about disturbing the wind, and at the same time you start to think about the cultural relevance of something like this. It's so tall that it's abstract.
Yeah.
You know, it's 2.5 times taller than Eureka Tower. This is a huge presence in a city that's low-rise. It's got the Petronas Towers,
Yes.
which were the tallest in the world at the time and are beautiful towers. And it had the KL Communications Tower. And now we're doing this huge thing. And it's on the site where on August the 31st, 1957, Tunku Abdul Rahman declared independence, and which is the word Merdeka. So he repeated Merdeka 7 times, raising his arm, going Merdeka, 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 in this little stadium, which is right next door to where our building was.
Perfect.
So perfect yet challenging, because how can you do, if you talk about context and scale appropriateness, how can you do something that tall on a little oval? The way you do it is you make that be a reminder of the time and the heritage. In other words, a monument.
Yes.
So even though that building is, I think it's 180,000 square metres of office space, it's got a Park Hyatt hotel, executives things, restaurant, observation deck, and a spire that you can climb if you're fit enough, a third of the way up. And in order to disturb the wind, it had to be shaped. And what you mentioned earlier about you like Eureka because wherever you see it, it's different.
Yes.
Absolutely the point of this building. And so, yeah, I was presenting it to Najib, that Prime Minister, and his mission on earth was one Malaysia. And so the spire initially was all about one Malaysia, but stemming from all the triangular pieces which were inspired by the Songket patterns, but also very subtly symbolised all the various communities and backgrounds and cultures that make up a complex Malaysia into a one Malaysia, hence the spire. But the observation deck is accessed by 2 glass elevators that run up the outside of the building, and we placed the spire on top of the elevator, so it was an off-centre. So happily, it looks like Tengku Abdul Rahman raising his right hand when he declared independence, and the people love it. So we lucked out. You know, it was through a kind of sensitivity that you hope you understand and develop, but you're not sure of when you start. It all comes out of the process of being there and talking and understanding the culture, as you would do if you were designing a house for somebody.
Yes.
But it occurs to me in retrospect that it could have gone really wrong. It could have been the biggest wasted opportunity. If you went there thinking, well, this is going to be a big tower and it's going to be a tour de force, and that's, you know, it's as shallow as that, you could have lost it. You could have lost an enormous opportunity. So I actually don't like talking about it in terms of the second tallest or 678.9 metres. I love talking about it in terms of it being a monument to a moment in time in a place that all the people feel very, very strong about.
Time, place and culture, the three
Time,
ingredients of
place
great architecture.
and culture. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, it's been 15 years. And the other thing is, Ross Harding, the great environmental guy in Melbourne, you know, he says, one of his catchphrases is, tall buildings have to give back. They must not be consumers, they must offer back. And this building, it's got all of the sustainability credentials. That goes without saying. So
It's bare minimum these days.
Not even proud of that either. You just got to do it.
Just got to do it.
What I am proud of is how much that project gave back to the community of Malaysia. It brought a mosque. It brought a museum of Songket materials. It brought an underground railway station. It brought tunnels to get the car parking in a couple of kilometres away, underground, not cluttering the road systems. It did road improvements. It's got a garden that was designed by Sasaki in Boston, landscape architects, which is 200 metres long and 60 metres wide, densely planted, but I think they called it, in the early days, the Silver River, because it starts up near the building as a pond and it cascades down into rivulets and waterfalls, and it comes down. And right in front of the stadium at the entry, it's a series of water jets and sprays which the kids can play in, or if there's a function that needs a pre-function area outside, they turn it off, and you've got this beautiful garden plaza. It brought the Sky Deck. It's brought 100,000 square metres of retail. You go, more retail?
Jobs.
It's affordable retail. It's not all your high end. We're annexed to Chinatown, and we've built a covered walkway from the tower all the way down to the monorail. You can walk from Chinatown through the building, through these unbelievably vast lobby spaces that are kind of awe-inspiring and dramatic.
Was all this part of the brief, or something you brought as the architect, as the lead and the master planner?
There's a lot of people that work on a project like this, but particularly the client. So there was a lot of discussion about what we could do, the things we could bring, and so it was a suite of community benefits that came out of a lot of discussion and collaboration.
And the empathy, the listening, that's a great hallmark of a great architect to deliver the fantastic outcome.
A great team.
Great team.
We had the world's best consultants. The team at FK was just remarkable, because obviously we hadn't done anything quite that big before. And everybody, the client was just fantastic. So it was a perfect storm of good things.
What do you think most people in the general public out there misunderstand about really tall buildings and skyscrapers?
Well, I think that one of the common views is that they're ego trips. Why does it have to be that tall? Oh, because I want to be the tallest, like the people in San Gimignano, the business people that wanted their tall tower to show how wealthy and important they were. There's a lot of connotations, but let's face it, tall buildings bring density on small plots of land. So let's get it right. Let's fully understand that these tall, particularly residential buildings in Melbourne, are actually benefiting so much. You have in Australia 108, there's 1,100 apartments, okay? 1,100 apartments, maybe that's 2,500 people, that's 5,000 cars, maybe 6,000 cars out in the suburbs. This is all happening on 3/4 of an acre.
Yeah.
And many of them don't have cars. They walk to work. But they live in a tower. They've got no good
amenity, no parks, no gardens.
No, they don't have the botanical gardens. They don't have the city. They don't have the river. They don't have the riverfront restaurants. They don't have any of that.
You engage with public life more, right?
Exactly.
You engage with your urban realm more, and you come out of being sheltered and hidden.
It's easier to have a neighbour in a tall building than a neighbour in suburbia.
Because you run into people, you share amenities.
It's all very amicable, and you don't have noisy lawnmowers and things that...
Power tools and trees over the fence, that's right.
And you might end up with a great neighbour in suburbia. And don't get me wrong, there's a great place for suburbia. But you're not quite as exposed to your neighbours. And if you don't get on with them too well, that can be hell, can't it?
It can. It really can.
Yeah.
I'm mindful of the time, so I will ask my last question. Yep. And that is, what gives you hope?
For the profession of architecture?
Both. For the profession, for yourself, for the future.
I look back, I'm 78 now, and that's a time when you do start to reflect more on the past in a way, because going through your history, you leave certain things undone. So now's the time to fix that up and do things that you always meant to do, and it's usually involving people and that sort of thing. So I'm very happy. I've had a very privileged life, like I think most architects do. It's a life that is, it's a beautiful thing, making buildings for other people. It's very satisfying. And it's all about dealing with people, so that's a beautiful thing. For the young people coming up, I wish them all the best. They are very clever. The students today are just unbelievable with their technologies and whatever. And and the industry should assist and help bring them up.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for joining me on the program. Thank you so much, Karl, for this conversation and the absolute wisdom and wonderful ideas and insight you've shared with us.
Thanks, Ilana. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for joining me for another evening of Radio Architecture with Ilana Razbash. This live show was broadcast and recorded in the Radio Karim studio on Bunurong Country. You can replay the show wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for tuning in and supporting community radio. Take care.
Hey, ST.
Yes,
If
mate.
you had a business, who would you use for your systems integration?
Look, I was thinking about this earlier on in the week, and I'd done a fair bit of homework on it, but the name that kept coming up was DB Results.
And GS, if you needed someone to improve your digital business transformation, who would you use?
Oh, without a doubt, I'd go straight to DB Results.
AC, digital solutions, you've got to improve it in your business. Who'd you go to?
Got to be DB Results, AA.
I tell you, DB Results are the right digital solutions for your business.
When the going gets tough,
Going gets tough.
when the going gets tough,
DB Results.
when the going gets tough,
DB Results.
Well, there you go.
Hi, this is Naomi Libba, composer and vocalist. I'm here at Radio Karam. They rock.